and welcome to Jim and Ben's Movie Adventures. My name is Ben, and with me is...
Jim. Major...
Okay, campers, rise and shine and defeat your booties, because it's cold out there today.
No, I think it's this one's On Your Feet, Maggot.
On your feet, maggot. You're right, it is. And we watched Edge of Tomorrow, as picked by the illustrious Jim. Thank you for picking this movie. It was nice.
I knew I loved this movie, and I've seen it a number of times. I don't think I realized how much I loved it until we just rewatched it again. It was pretty much like every minute of this movie, I'm like, that's right, I love this thing. That's right, I love this movie.
You want to know a secret? The last 2 times I've watched this movie, including this time, is because you made me watch it.
Yeah, really? Well, there you go.
For anyone who doesn't know, Jim does a birthday extravaganza each year where he makes his friends watch a movie. This was one of them.
It's true. It's true. I did make people come to my house and watch this. But look, I think everyone enjoyed it. Like, I thought it was a good choice. But
it's a great choice.
For those who don't know much about Edge of Tomorrow, let me give you a summary. Okay, so let's do it. Here we go. Away we go with our summary. So a species of deadly animal-like aliens called mimics have invaded the Earth, and they're sweeping their way across Europe. The militaries of the world have united to fight the threat, but it is not going well. Major William Cage, played by Tom Cruise, is a public relations officer with no combat experience. He is ordered by General Brigham, who is played by Brendan Gleeson, to cover a major offensive against the mimics in France. Cage tries to refuse and threatens the general, which then leads to him being demoted and sent to the front lines as a combat grunt in the first wave. Cage is forced into a combat unit led by Master Sergeant Farrell, played by Bill Paxton. Ill-prepared, he is deployed onto the battlefield wearing an advanced mechanical combat suit. During the chaotic invasion, Cage kills an unusually large mimic known as an alpha, but then dies when covered in its acidic blood. Cage wakes up to find himself back at the Heathrow military base, now reliving a single 24-hour period over and over again. He is stuck in a time loop, repeatedly dying and waking up at the same point. With each loop, he gains more knowledge about the battle and about mimics. During one of the loops, he meets Sergeant Rita Vataski, played by Emily Blunt, a renowned soldier also known as the Angel of Verdun. Recognizing his situation, she instructs him to find her when he wakes up. It's revealed that Rita previously experienced a similar time loop after killing an alpha herself, but she lost the ability after a blood transfusion. Rita trains Cage to improve his combat skills, and together they seek to end the time loop by finding and destroying the Mimic's central intelligence, which is a creature called the Omega, which is hidden in a dam in Germany. They deduce that the Omega controls the Mimics and the time loop, and that destroying it will actually end the war. Despite numerous attempts, they fail to locate the Omega at the dam, and Cage learns that the Omega uses alphas to reset the day when one of them is killed. Through repeated trials, he experiences the horrors of war and the burdens of continuous death. After working to get a piece of technology from the military high command, Cage eventually has a vision that reveals the Omega's true location is actually Paris, beneath the Louvre Pyramid. He and Rita plan a final mission to destroy it, but at this time, Cage is injured, and after receiving his own blood transfusion, he loses the ability to reset the day. Cage and Rita assemble a team from J-Squad and infiltrate the heavily fortified Paris. In a climactic battle, they fight their way to the Omega. Rita sacrifices herself to give Cage a chance to reach the Omega. Cage manages to kill an Alpha and the Omega and then detonates explosives, destroying the Omega and the Mimics. As he dies, he is once again covered in the Omega's blood, resetting the loop, but this time it's 2 days earlier, way back to the start of the movie before he was demoted. The Mimics have now been mysteriously defeated because he already defeated the Omega in what is now the future, and humanity is victorious. Cage retains his memories and goes to meet Rita, who does not recognize him, which starts a new chapter between the two of them with a potential future ahead of them. Smash to credits, the end.
All right, I just did the McDonald's theme song.
I don't know why you did that. That's.
I was just so excited. I'm loving it. All right.
That's good to hear.
Yeah, it's been a week, eh? All right, so here are the facts. released 2014, directed by, I mean, I've discovered over time, Jim, that you're a director's guy. You really log in on a guy and you follow him. Doug Lineman, directed by Doug Lineman. Born Identity, Mr. and Mrs. Smith. I don't know Jumper. I mean, that's just your movie through and through. And Swingers, the Jon Favreau and Vince Vaughn classic. Screenplay by Christopher McQuarrie, who is he writes all of the Tom Cruise movies.
Yeah, he's Cruise's guy.
Bunch of Mission Impossible, Jack Reacher's, Top Gun Maverick, like just so many, The Mummy, so many Tom Cruise movies. And Jez and John Henry Butterworth, who written some cool stuff, some plays, but they also gave us Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny. So can't forgive them for that one.
Thanks,
guys. Cool beans. Okay, look, you're living a dream I'll never live, but cool beans. I don't often mention it unless I've got something interesting to say about them, but cinematographer, I'm going to stuff this up, Dion Beebe, or Beebe. He's a local lad. Brisbane, Queensland, Australia. Awesome. Also did cinematography for a movie that Jim has, I think, mentioned before on this podcast, Equilibrium.
Yeah. He's done a lot, actually.
He's done so much.
Yeah, he knows what he's doing.
So many different genres, so many different styles. Like he's a workman cinematographer. Like he doesn't just have his thing. Which is pretty cool. Starring Tom Cruise, Emily Blunt, Bill Paxton, and Brendan Gleeson. They were the only 4 actors listed in the top billing. I've added Noah Taylor, just because, again, Australian connection, and I think actually a really important part of this too. Budget, $178 million. Box office, $370.5 million. By every stretch of the imagination, this movie was a success before, after, and during its kind of inception. Again, love this movie. I have a question, and I couldn't find the answer. I didn't look online. I was trying to find it in the movie. Why are they called mimics?
I don't actually really know, to be honest. Like,
because any knowledge you would have about their mimic nature, you couldn't have before this film.
No. It's a little bit. I'm not sure. I don't understand why.
Is it because they adjust their tactics or something so quickly? Like, I don't know, man. Yeah, confused me.
They do say, even though Rita and Cage are the only ones who actually know for sure, they do say that the enemy has, almost a supernatural knowledge of what we're going to do before we do it. Okay. They're just not sure how. Like, they don't realize it goes as far as that they're actually have time travel powers. Do you know what I mean? Like, so perhaps that's the reference, but no, they don't really explain it in that sense. So, but what did you think of this thing?
I've seen this movie maybe 4 or 5 times. And as I said, like, I think you probably told me to watch it the first time. You've made me watch it 2 times, and then I've just either caught it on a whim or something the other 2 times. It's always enjoyable, and it just feeds that part of my brain that loves a time loop in a movie. I love watching a character perfect a time loop. It scratches a part of my brain that, like, when you scratch a dog and it starts kicking its leg? Time loops do that to my brain. And I couldn't tell you why. I tried to explain it last time we watched Groundhog Day. It does the same thing. What I liked in this movie that, for example, Groundhog Day doesn't have is its extended cast is a bit more fleshed out. Not lots more fleshed out. I mean, at the start, they're kind of Chekhov's military squad, Squad J. You're like, hey, there's this squad, and you kind of get to know them, but we don't use them at all, and then we do use them at the end. But I kind of liked their kind of alien-esque, like, just generic jarhead kind of banter and vibes. And something we haven't had in a while, just such a killer role for a female actor in Emily Blunt in this movie. Like, it's more, in some places, her movie than it is Tom Cruise's movie. Like, she's more emotional for most of it, and all kind of like closed off and damaged. It's really cool. Love this movie.
Yeah, it's actually their dynamic's great in the film. She's great in the film. She's a character who, it's almost, and what I love about the way they did her character is it's not like over the course of the movie she changes radically.
She's the same.
She's really a hardcore soldier at the start when you first meet her, and sure, she softens a bit towards him over the course of the film, but it is not a huge, push for her. It's just a little softening at the end. She actually even reminds him, in the finale, she's like, I'm a soldier, we're doing this. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, she's like not afraid, she's gonna get in it. She's yeah, I think she's a great character. So but it's funny, we talked, and look, we can't really compare this to Groundhog Day. I kind of picked it because, it's a bit of fun. It's also a modern go at a time loop movie. But
Yeah.
at the same time, we did talk about the casting of Bill Murray in Groundhog Day and being a little bit like, it's a mixed bag, with what he was sort of good at that point in time. Looking at this, and you go, well, actually, if you are trying to tell a film about a guy who is literally perfecting a series of action oriented movements,
Yeah.
Tom Cruise is the perfect casting for that. Like,
the dude's a robot.
Literally, like, it's like, he is this character in the sense that, he's known to just drill something again and again and again until it's absolutely perfect. So watching him then sort of, play that out in a fictional sphere is kind of delightful when his real world, proclivity for like action and perfection.
That's a strange thing in a modern day actor, that knowing more about how they go about their life and making films actually adds more enjoyment to the film, because there's a lot of times you're going, he probably did that. Like, that's awesome. Like, he did that. Whereas, like, some actors, when you know more about them or less about them, it doesn't really work out. But yeah, no, like, he is the most, really, if you think about his trajectory, the most unlikely action star. Like, if you watched his starting roles, this isn't where Tom Cruise ends up, right? But he's just found this niche, this kind of bubble of Tom Cruise style action movies that he just crushes in a way that nobody in modern cinema does. And it's really impressive.
Yeah, he's very good at it. But like, look, I love this movie. I think structurally it's fantastic. I do have a few, much as I'm gonna say how much I love about it, I got a few problems with the
I do
film
too.
that I've always had, and they've always kind of bugged me. But at the end of the day, whatever those are, and when we get to them, sure, I'll talk about them. Like, it moves at such a clip. It's got such great characters. It's so well executed, and it's really like the movie, is so smart that when it's trying to gloss over a plot point and just get you from A to B, it knows it's doing that, and it tries to get that out of the way and move you through it as quickly as possible so that you don't think too hard about it. Because as soon as you do stop, the problems I have are plot based, and they occur, to try and basically get us from the end of Act 2 into Act 3. And I get why they did it. They had to do this somehow, and they had to do it quickly. But ultimately, like, the film knows that it's a little bit of a weakness there, so it tries to just get us through it and get us over it, so we can move to the next logical step.
This film went through a lot of development script-wise. I mean, I know you know this, but it's based on a Japanese sci-fi light novel called All You Need Is Kill, which
I've read.
Yeah, have you? That's amazing. Which the basic premise of is actually really quite close to this movie.
Yeah.
Like there are differences. I think the novel's a lot darker by all accounts. I haven't read it. But yeah, it's very similar in that there are mimics, there are mechas, there's the time loop, there's even character names are very similar in some places.
It's interesting. This is one of the few times where, having read the novel or novella, it's quite short. And then having watched the film, this is actually one of the few times where the film is actually better, in my opinion, than the source material. It's more fleshed out. The characters are stronger. It holds together a lot better than even the novella. So, but yes, like having that source text, I think was certainly helpful for them. So,
Well, my understanding of Japanese light novels is a lot of the times they're a primer or a beginning before the release of a manga or a long version series. So like almost a spec script, right?
yes,
So there really is this light novel and they publish it and they see how many people like it. And then they kind of go on to create the next thing based on it or a series or something like that. So that it's short and doesn't contain as much as this movie makes total sense to me.
One
Yeah,
thing about the film, sorry, I'm just like excited because I really, really enjoyed rewatching this film, like more than even I thought I would. But just while we were talking before about Cruise being perfect casting, the first sort of 2/3 of the film, or no, probably the first third of the film, he is playing against type for his usual action roles, in the sense that he plays a character who is a self-professed coward,
he's a worm.
who is also happens to be in the military, but he's just a ladder climber, and he doesn't want to do combat. He is not a hero. He doesn't understand war. And he just doesn't actually want to be involved at all. And in fact, he does everything he can to get out of it, So, which obviously Cruise usually plays a very straightforward hero. And sure enough, he actually grows into that by the end of the film. So by the end of the film, we're watching a performance that more fits with what we know Tom Cruise to play on our screens. But what was really fun about this one was watching him get there, watching the character develop into that person, because the person that he starts out as is, as you say, a worm, a person who is, not just afraid, but also manipulative. He's, really quite a despicable kind of character in a lot of different ways. And just watching how he tries to get out of things and manipulate things to his own sort of advantage, So that transformation was additionally really fun to watch, because they didn't have to give him as much of an arc as they did, and giving the character such a strong arc was very, very helpful. In actually selling the whole film, I think.
Well, what I really liked about that turn, just going on about it, is at the start he's a pitchman. He's a salesman. Like he's selling. It's the equivalent of World War II and World War I, selling war bonds, right? He's selling the concept of war. He's selling the devices they use. And he's this kind of manipulative person. And when he makes that full turn, and when he finally starts to put things together, he actually starts using those skills again. He's like, when he's talking to he's like, what if I told you? Like, and he goes into his spiel that he kind of had at the start, but he's using it to get the pieces together he needs to complete the mission of killing the Omega. Because there's like a mini twist in this movie, in that they actually know that he's reliving the day, the mimics. And they manipulate him, and they work out they manipulated Emily Blunt's character, Rita, as well. Like, it was a loss that was on purpose, so that they would commit to this final offensive and they could wipe out humanity's armed forces in one go. And they work this out, and then they find the real location. Is it under the Louvre?
Yes.
Like, it's, yeah. So for a while, I'm like, I think that's under the Louvre. And then when they're going to it, it's so battle damaged and stuff, it's kind of sometimes a bit hard to see. But yeah, I liked that they kind of built, like, they built in his personality didn't change completely. He just grew, and these new things became a part of the personality, and the old things and skills were still there, and he used them, which was kind of neat. Now, one thing I didn't really enjoy about the film is the actual aliens in action. They're so quick and violently fast, and for a while it's actually hard to pin down what shape are they. Like, what do they actually look like? Because when you see them, they're kind of like, they almost look like a glitch, right? Like, and that's on purpose for parts of it. I get it, because they're getting controls and commands sent to them. It's like, it's only until when you see an alpha for the first time, you're like, oh, this is kind of what they look like. And I really wish we kind of got a solid image of the drones a bit sooner, because I actually didn't find them very scary this time, and until you get a proper picture of it. It's kind of a reverse Jaws.
Yeah, I didn't mind it because I like this idea that, they're scary because they're unstoppable rather than perhaps, what they're going to do on a moment to moment basis. And that whole look, what is functionally their version of the Normandy storming the beaches sequence, right? Which is really the whole middle section of the movie, where we're seeing that him perfect that sequence, that totally chaotic sequence against the mimics. It's less about the mimics and more about him surviving the chaos of that entire operation. So I kind of feel like, it just didn't bother me. I understand what you're saying. So, and look, yes, they're certainly very CG as well, like in their execution, but yeah, at the end of the day, it wasn't a worry for me. So I love that middle section where he's perfecting that beach, getting to know Rita, working with her and watching their relationship evolve too, keeping in mind that he's getting to know more about her and she of course isn't, because every time she meets him it's the same day, right? But like, and even just I love just watching them go over the battle plan, and she's getting upset at him because she feels he's not giving her clear enough directions, and she's like, we're going to die if you can't step up and teach me this. We're going to, like, all that stuff I just thought was fantastic, and really the strongest part of the movie. And interestingly, we talked about this in Groundhog Day, but the start of the time loop is always the hardest part to get right from an editing perspective. And I was keenly aware of that. We just talked about this in Groundhog Day. So once the time loop started, or his first day kind of began, I kind of became hyper aware, because I was like, oh, how are they going to do it? Like, is it going to be, some of the problems?
It's pretty similar lengthwise, really.
It is actually, which kind of surprised me. Like, the first day is very, very long in the cut. And the second day is much longer than I thought it would be in the cut as well. I will say after that, they did a really good job of totally burying the amount of days we've actually lived, and you don't know, and it's not even really that important, from sort of that second day onward. I sort of thought it did a nice job, but I was a little bit surprised. I sort of thought that their cutting ratio would get faster than it did. But again, I don't think it hurts the film. I think it actually works quite well here. So maybe that's perhaps maybe it's a genre thing, but I didn't feel it as keenly as I felt it in Groundhog Day, even though I do think it was much slower than I expected around that portion of the film.
I found a interview with Cruise that explained something that I couldn't put my finger on when watching the movie this time. And I was looking at it going, there's a lot of differences in this film to the previous time loop movie, Groundhog Day, but one of them is the mechanic of the time loop in this movie is death. Death resets the time loop. He has to die. And there are times when Ultimate Soldier Rita kills him, because she knows the time loop has to be reset. And I'm like, this should feel way darker than it is. It should feel kind of really gross, but it doesn't. The way they kind of present it and put it through. And I found this line is like, when they were writing the script, a lot of the writers were struggling with the deaths and that sort of stuff. And Cruise compared it to Wile E. Coyote and the Roadrunner, saying, think about it this way. It's fun finding different ways to kill the coyote. He's like, it's a cartoon. Treat the deaths as kind of cartoonish, which they do, right? Like, he looks frustrated as he's about to die sometimes, or he's like exhausted, or all that sort of stuff. Only at the very start is he really afraid. And then after that, he gets used to it, and him not being afraid takes the darkness out of it. And it's quite a feat when you really think about the subject matter of this film.
I think as well, going along with that, the speed with which they kill him is also really, really important. It's always basically a quick and painless death, like, pretty much every single time. And when we get into some of the deaths that he has during the training sequences, like, he's injecting a lot of humor into those as well, where he's like, she's like, your leg's broken, and he's like, no, I'm okay, it's fine.
He's crawling away,
like, and then she kills him or something, and he restarts again. So, but like. So you know yeah, there was a lot of really well conceived, well thought out stuff. And I think the action's excellent in this movie as well. Now, Doug Liman is no stranger to shooting action, and I have seen all of his films. And you sort of mentioned, you know, like I tend to follow directors. This is, in my opinion, the best action that Doug Liman has shot to date. You know,
100%.
so I've never seen him, you know, put together sequences as well as what we end up with in this movie. So I really think the action is spectacular in the film. You know, there's a lot of CGI, but yes, there's also a lot of wire work. There's a lot of practical stunts. There's a lot of you know, blended elements, and ultimately it's about editing, choreography, performance, and all of that stuff comes together really well. So, and complicated action too. Like, we're on the beach, we're in the you know, the jacket technology, the mech suit, if you like. You know, we're running, we're jumping, we're shooting, we're diving over things. We've got these big bulky props, you know, which sometimes we've got to hand off to CG, sometimes we've got to do it on wires, sometimes we've got to fake it with just the actors. Like, there's a lot of complexity happening, and I think they executed it really well.
So I don't know necessarily a word this, but I love an action movie where the action is open and visible. The action isn't cut around to hide it. For example, I just watched, because I wasn't well, 4 of the Bourne movies in the last 2 days. Just quietly, the second one's the best one. But yeah, their whole shtick or their whole look is they cut through the action. It doesn't really sit in the action. And there are practical reasons for that. There are stylistic reasons for that. But this type of action where it's kind of open, visible, you actually see the stunt. It doesn't cut away from it. You see the action. It's just such a dopamine hit to watch. You get the full experience. It's more immersive without making you dizzy or motion sick. But yeah, it's open. This is the way I call it. It's kind of like almost the classic kung fu movies, right? The guys who really know how to fight shooting a kung fu scene, they just stand back and watch them choreograph and fight a kung fu scene. That's way more enjoyable than quick cut hand-to-hand stuff. But yeah, I genuinely love the action in this. The ending of this movie, I have a problem with. It is, and there's a reason for it. Again, they hadn't written the ending when they started shooting this film. And they're like, well, we'll come up with something. The ending of the book is real dark. Like, from what I just read, it's like they're in the book, there's this idea of antennas that send out the signals, and they have to eliminate all the antennas. And just like Harry Potter, they're antennas too, just like he was a Horcrux. And they kind of have a Black Widow Hawkeye fight to the death to eliminate antennas, which are themselves, and only he lives, the main character, and the reader character passes away. And unlike this movie, there is no happy time loop reset. But I actually, narratively, like that a lot more than what we get, which is the reset to happiness. And they explain the reset to happiness because they actually view this movie as almost equal parts comedy as it is action sci-fi. And you can't end a comedy like that. You have to end a comedy kind of either reset back to where you were or on a happy note in most circumstances. And that's what they've done. But I think I would have preferred the darker end.
Yeah, it's interesting, like, because that's not what I thought you were going to say. Like, I have other issues with
mechanically and plot wise. You're like, eh.
Yeah, the back sort of, you know, third of the film starts to look, which I'll get into. I didn't have a problem with the happy ending though. I was you know, very you know, pleased, and I also think as well the execution of it was really good in the sense that, you know, it's a reveal. The look on his face when he sees that she's alive but doesn't remember him, and then the cut to black. Like, the execution of the ending works very well for me. You know, which I just thought they executed that really well. But my issues really come from we spend most of the movie trying to do one thing, trying to game this beach scenario to get Cage and Rita to the Omega. Now, I'm never a fan in really any movie when one of the main motivators for the plot is a vision that a character gets. I'm like, let's not do that. Let's not be that movie.
It's a tricksy vision.
It's I'm getting visions. I'm like, why? Aliens and stuff, like visions.
I got some alien blood in my mouth.
Let's not be that. Like, at the same time, it allows them to spend time on the things they want to spend time on rather than super convoluted plot mechanics, which I understand, you know what I mean? So, but look, so we introduce the visions and then we work towards the visions, no problem. So we spend a lot of time on that. And then just before we head into the third act, when we're sort of at the end of the second act, he gets to the dam, and he's like, there's no Omega there. It was a trap, It's like, that's a shame. It was a trap. That's no good. That whole time we've been spending to try and get to this place, it's not going to work. What are we going to do? At which point Noah Taylor's like, well, I created this device that would also do the same thing as the visions. We can't get to it. It's in a really hard spot to get to. I'm like, what?
It's actually in a super easy spot to get to because we're in a time loop.
Considering how difficult it was to get off the beach, probably easier to break into a government office, right?
Brendan Gleeson is formidably stubborn.
I'm sure he is, but if I was Cage or Cruise, I'd be like, are you kidding me with this right now? Are you kidding me with this right now? He's probably done thousands of days, dying countless times, had a world of pain, and he doesn't even have to go to the front line at all. He's got to go to an office in London instead. I'm like, I would have
this conversation should have happened earlier.
I would have liked to get there if we had to end up. And look, it's that same thing of once we get to the office, we have great sequences and we have wonderful scenes, and then he loses the day, and that gets us to Paris, and it all works, right? It all drives the plot forward, but it's just like we got to do a lot of exposition gymnastics where the characters are talking fast in a quick scenario, and Cage or Tom Cruise has to, as a character, just brush over the fact that they've been sitting on this information for however many days, and really he should be much more upset about that, actually consider
the other thing
situation.
Is too, the final assault, through them trying to do this, he loses his reset. He gets a blood transfusion,
which is very important.
So that's one more day that they have. They know where it is. They know where it actually is, but they've got one more day to do it. And they basically do this last day without resets, without foreknowledge of what they're getting into, right? So again, it's kind of a bit of a throwaway of the general premise of, okay, we'll learn, we'll do it. Actually, we'll just get really lucky on this one day. And
but I think
a lot of people will die. But it adds tension, it adds stakes to the end.
Yeah, exactly. It adds tension and stakes to the finale, which I think is needed for the film, in order to serve as a finale. So it's just really that idea. First, we had visions to get us to our objective. And then when that fell apart, we had mysterious technology that we had all along and just didn't talk about to get us to our final objective.
That thing just gives you a vision after you stab yourself with it. So it's still visions.
Yeah, exactly.
It's just more accurate visions.
So look, but look, when I say it, I'm like, here are my big problems with the movie, right? I'm like, pretty minor, right? At the end of the day, that's a little bit of, a connective tissue that joins together excellent sequences and character scenes. So
if you enjoy sci-fi, action, Tom Cruise, Emily Blunt, any kind of two of these things, this is an enjoyable movie for you. Like, it is fun, it is fast, it's over before you realize it. There's not a lot of slowdown in this movie. It's so good. There's one big question though. Sorry, I'll let you go before I go.
Oh, no, mine's a different topic, so you go.
Mine's a different topic too.
Oh, well, I'll go on my topic first. So I was just going to say that, like, you know, much as we've sort of said, oh, look, we love the movie, like, interestingly, it kind of hit when it was released, and it had a very kind of awkward tail on it, like, in the sense that, well, when they released it, and it's really because they spent so much on it. You know, they spent nearly $200 million on it. So even though it was up in the 300 millions for its box office, that actually wasn't really high enough for the film. Like, you know, you start to get into those figures where you say, well, maybe they broke even, but at this point it's not a slam dunk that they definitely broke even. Now, they would have gotten it on strong, you know, home media sales, which is kind of where they started mucking around with the title. And it was a very odd choice, but I could see why they did it as well. Like, what they did this strange thing. So if you don't know what I'm talking about, it sounds like Ben does, but look, if you're listening, you might not know.
Die, repeat.
Yeah, exactly. So they call the movie Edge of Tomorrow, and then when it does pretty well critically and sort of, you know, not as well as they needed it to financially, they actually changed their marketing push for the home media release, and they didn't actually go as far as to change the title of the film. But what they did was they kind of almost changed the title of the film anyway. Like, they minimized on all of the home media posters the actual title, Edge of Tomorrow. That's still there, but it's in tiny font. And they put in massive font that slogan, Live, Die, Repeat, because they thought this would sell the movie a little bit more. It did actually serve the purpose of confusing audiences, because some people literally thought the movie was called Live, Die, Repeat, which then made it harder to find or whatever else when they were recommending it to others. So it was kind of a mixed bag as to whether or not that actually worked as a strategy. But, you know, at the end of the day, the home media sales were strong enough, and the movie is good enough and has had a long enough tail that we may actually get a sequel to it one day, which I think would be excellent.
That's what I was going to bring up. So this is one of those, there's every once in a while there's a movie, and as soon as it's done, people are like, when are they going to release the second one? This deserves a second one. I want to see another one. And this is one of those movies. It's so easily consumable, so much fun. People genuinely want more and still do. And for years, there's been hey, Tom's interested. That really means nothing. Or, hey, yeah, Warner Brothers want to make this, or someone wants to make this. That's really nothing. There was a glimmer of hope this year in January. Basically, Tom Cruise did a new contract with Warner Brothers to develop a bunch of films. And in that conversation was the kind of want to develop an Edge of Tomorrow sequel. And for years, people have said Tom has an idea for it and wants to do it. And they've kind of, the conversation with an actual studio between the people who make the film has happened. It hasn't just been, I spoke to this guy and he said, yeah, it'd be cool. Well, we have an idea. That is still a million miles away, though, from making a movie. I think in reality speak, depending on the climate we're currently in, we're actually probably more likely to get a Netflix series or a streaming series out of this world than we are a sequel. That's just my opinion based on what we've seen recently, because it would suit that. It would suit a serialized kind of 6, 7, 8 episode, hour-long kind of streaming thing. Not that I necessarily want to see that. I'd actually rather see a film. But yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's so hard to know. Like, you know, ultimately, I think it probably at this point in his career and with the clout he's currently got, it would really be if Tom Cruise wants to make this his next project, then he's actually back at a point, you know, where he could actually just make that happen, you know, particularly with Macquarie and the back pocket as the writer, he can bring along to get into the ideas. And look, I'd be happy to see it. So because I really think this is quite the gem of a film. So, but look, thanks for coming along the Edge of Tomorrow journey with me. I think it was interesting for me just watching it back.
Repeat with you any day.
Well, particularly coming off the back of Groundhog Day to watch another time loop movie. Now, look, I hope you don't have another time loop movie for me, though, because there's only so many of these I can do in a row.
Earlier in the week, I texted you and I said, I'm actually super happy about the next movie I chose. And I actually sent you 3 clues. Do you remember those clues, or do you need me to read them again?
The biggest one, I know, the 2 I remember were 1989 and... Wait, what was it? Sunglasses.
So 1989 was, I gave you a clarification, is the Australian release date for this film.
Yeah.
American, it was 1988. The second clue was Sunglasses, and you immediately threw back at me, Top Gun. No, Batman, Top Gun. Nah, I'm feeling good about Top Gun. And then I released the third clue, which was 8 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah, and that's the one that was like, what?
So I'm guessing you haven't got it. So I have 2 more clues.
Well, look, I'll tell you my current thoughts, because I didn't want to go and do a bunch of research because I thought that would be disingenuous. Do you know what I mean? Like, but look, so originally when you said 89, and look, I'm not going to pretend like I know what was Australian 89 versus US 89. There was probably a difference because you've, specified that. But I was like, okay, Sunglasses, 1989. I felt good about Top Gun until you threw in the 8 o'clock thing. And then I was left with, okay, look, it could be Back to the Future 2. Doc Brown had some weird sort of like, silvery kind of sunglasses. And then I was like, I couldn't remember like what the times were on the DeLorean clock, if it was 8 o'clock or whatever. So I'm like, I don't know. And then I was like, the other Sunglasses movie from like around then is Weekend at Bernie's, which I've never seen.
You've got to do Weekend at Bernie's.
So, right, so it's not Weekend at Bernie's. So like, but I know they put sunglasses on the dead guy, and that's the whole like thing. So this was my thought process, and I felt like there are some good picks, but I don't think I have it. And let's hear the other clues.
3 more clues. I'm sure the last one will give it away. The next clue is, or clue number 4 is Drifter.
Okay.
The main character is a drifter. 5th clue, Roderick Toombs. Roderick Toombs. He actually goes by a more famous name, which is the last clue, Rowdy Roddy Piper. Oh, this makes me so excited that you haven't got this all. John Carpenter. John Carpenter's They Live is the movie we're watching, Jim.
I never would have gotten that. If you're like John Carpenter, I was like Escape from New York. Like, what are we watching the thing? Like,
John Carpenter's They Live stars Rowdy Roddy Piper as a drifter who comes across a pair of sunglasses that show him the world is actually ruled by aliens who use subliminal messaging to control the populace.
Why did you think I would get this? This is not my genre.
Pop culture. It's pop culture. This is a cult classic. We also are friends with a man who is obsessed with these type of films, and I thought through osmosis you may have gotten it.
Right, sure. Look, this isn't really my genre. I'm happy to go there. So They Live.
You have to go there. Hey? It doesn't matter if you have to or not.
It's the rules of the cast, isn't it? So
it's John Carpenter's They Live. It is corny. It is like 80s weird sci-fi with a political message to the max.
Okay.
And I'm super excited to be watching it with you.
Well, I'm now excited too. So thank you for that pick, I hope. Thank you. I don't know. We'll see. We'll see on the next cast.
It's been a very long time. I was a teenager last time I watched it.
Okay.
So thank you for listening to Jim and Ben's Movie Adventures. If you'd like to listen to more of our stuff, please head over to our Apple or Spotify pages, and you can find us under Jim and Ben's Movie Adventures. You can also find us on YouTube at Jim and Ben's Movie Adventures. If you'd like to see kind of some movie posters and some stuff, or interact with us, you can do so on our Instagram, which is Jim_and_Ben. And as I've said for the last few podcasts, if you'd like and comment on both our YouTube and our Apple podcast, then go to our Instagram page and DM me or comment on a photo and say I've done those things. Me and you will talk, and you will help me pick a movie that I will inflict on Jim in a future podcast. Thank you so much for listening to this week's podcast. Looking forward to watching They Live with you. I've been Ben.
And I have been Jim. Live, die, repeat until
Live,
we
die,
see
repeat.
each other
Live,
again.
die, repeat.
Bye.
Bye.